Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss Pre-Market Report for Tuesday, February 6th, 2018. I'm Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. A significant sell-off in the previous session and in overnight trading here for the ES. Prices broke back below the 2760 zone, which was a major LVN area at first here. There was another 2700 level here that was significant. And once those levels really gave up, it was open season to continue to roll lower back across the thinly traded zone that we had played before. So this is what we were talking about this entire time before, and it's hard to kind of visualize this sometimes, but you have all of this trading behavior that was down here this entire time, but when price got really, really vertical here, it left behind very thin profile. And as I mentioned to our group in the trading room all the time, you know, the market has to go back there and retrade through that zone somehow, some way. And in this particular point in time, the market sold off hard and went through that zone. Big time selling pressure. This is unusual, obviously, compared to what we've seen here in the last several years. But even if you go back to a weekly time frame, say a few years ago, we've had this zone here, and those sell-offs were intended to create establish a range of activity that it traded within for a couple of years before we saw the recent expansion. This large pullback could do essentially the same thing. It could create that strong top, a strong bottom, and now this becomes the playing field for the ES over the next perhaps many months. Could be throughout the rest of the year. We could be playing in this zone before we look to see another move higher, or perhaps even a continuation. So this major wave back here could be setting the stage for a wider range to do business in down the road. And usually after you see a significant decline like this, there is a tendency to bounce pretty hard back toward the center point of that range. So as soon as this thing finds a strong low, and every time it finds a strong low, it seems like it just continues lower. So it needs to have a real definitive low, then we might see a bounce back up. And you can see from the low of today's session here, this would be your average monthly range target zone up above. So a primary target would be basically 2733 would be the 100% average range target. And then you have the target that comes in at 2682, which would be the primary 75%. So we have a good shot to bounce at some point as soon as we find a strong low. And at that point, we might begin to see a larger range establish. If that does not occur and 2700 remains a spot that just really you can't see much action beyond it, we do have value down below. So that's going to be something to watch out for. So just wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about this type of behavior and what to expect coming forward. So we'll continue to watch that. The NQ also with another round of selling pressure, very similar to the ES here, very significant, back to 6260 already. That's a significant line in the chart. You can see a major LVN here at about 6150. That also significant area of support. And so again, we've sold off, completely taken out the January low, and now we're back to the FOMC key level from November. Bounced off a bit a couple of times. After selling off up here, we're now right back to that level. So again, this could set the stage for a wider range of action over the coming months. And if we do have a definitive low here that forms, at some point we might get a bounce back toward the midpoint of this range. And right now, based off of the current low of the session, the overnight range here, that would be your target zone up above. So 69.10 basically on the upside up there, and then the bottom end target would be 67.50. So we do have the potential to see a decent little bounce here, but we got to find that strong low. Crude oil continues to look weak. Again, this one has not been able to really push through and continue higher, and is now coming back against the range. I mentioned before that if price were to come into about 62.5, that might provide another opportunity to return it back towards 66, 66.25. Right now we're in a range at these highs, but if there's any failure to hold 62.5, then we could start to see this thing mark back toward 59s. Looking at gold, here's a look at gold. Gold still continues to hold at that 1362.40 key level. That's the top of the key range here. You can see it's after the recent rally here. It looks very similar to crude oil, where it's just kind of gotten stuck at these highs. Really hasn't been able to push any higher. You can clearly see there's been some resistance, some lower highs, lower lows. And again, there's a nice LVN here, about 1325, where if price dropped into that zone, bulls may be able to come back up and retry highs of this range. Any failure to hold that 1325, 1322 LVN could open up a return back to that C VPOC around 1280. Lastly, let's take a look at XBT. Bitcoin finally reached our target at 6,700. Again, this is a target that we offered way back over here when prices were not really showing a jump off the absorption point. Failed new high, failed new high. And so it was about around this day right here where we said, okay, it looks like the stops are going to get it run. The first target's going to be around 9K. If we bounce, the next target could be about 6,700. And that played out perfectly according to what we were looking at. When I was at the speech for the AAII group in Austin, we talked about 12K to 10K forming a very, very tight compression range, and that expansion will likely be to the downside and would likely reach that target. So we got it. Now we got to see how it plays out from here. Again, this thing has been very, very bearish, and anytime price halts, it can't see a good bounce right now, and that's not good at all. So again, look at the next major target below. That's 2100. 2100 comes from the back end of this range. So that impulse sell-off back to the mid gave us a nice key range. If you use a 100% extension from the edge of that range, you get 2100. Are we headed to 2100? We could be. If this next bounce right here falls shy of, say, 10K, or we really can't get back above 10K, it could be a 10K to 2100 type of move that comes next. So we'll keep an eye on XBT and Bitcoin as this thing continues to play out. That's it for now. We'll see how these develop the rest of the session. Good luck and trade well.